Something brand new from the Marist Poll. This time on Poll Hub, we'll talk about our new America Now Index, what the first numbers show, why we built it in the first place, and where we're thinking of taking it. Then, trust in science. Has the pandemic changed the way Americans think about science? Do they trust what scientists are saying? More, less, the same? We're going to take a look. So let's get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Jay DeDapper, Director of Innovation here at the Marist Poll.
And I'm Miringoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
We do lots of polls, and we talk about new polls a lot of the time, but it's pretty rare that we talk about an entirely new thing that we've done for the public that is, we think, innovative and super helpful. And that is the America Now Index, or it's kind of America Now Indices, which we'll talk about in a second. But we launched that this week. And Barb, why are we doing this? Why did we think this was something important? What's the deal?
Because you told us we had to, Jay. No, I'm just kidding, Barb.
Okay, and that's the end of the show. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Well, you know, just in case anybody hasn't noticed, a lot has been happening of late. Particularly the last couple of months. And it's had a major impact on not only on many Americans' health, their jobs, their finances, but also how we interact with each other. And I think given this is a different time, it also requires different measures. So I think we all brainstormed together to come up with an idea of, well, how can we measure where we are right now, which is what polls do really, really well, and how can we see how things change over time? And polls do that, of course, when you ask the same questions over and over again, you can identify trends. And we see, you know, a lot of that for finances, health, social issues, and all sorts of things. So we decided that what we would do is we'd kind of put a circle around all of it, take these different elements, people's finances, how they feel about their health, how they feel about their community and politics, and perhaps even how they trust different institutions, and combine that into, well, an index, which is what Americans are thinking and how they're thinking about the present and the future.
Barb, before we go any further, though, I think it's important, and you did so well on that answer, I'll just toss it back to you. Why is this not just a big poll? What makes an index an index?
So an index takes a little bit more science than just a poll, even though many polls are scientific. And asking questions is a great way to take a look at opinions and attitudes at the moment. We've all talked about our little snapshot theory, our blood test. Lee, I know you're fond of your tasting your stew. And that all
that didn't sound right.
But you know, and that
we'll refer you to Poll Hub episode 4 for that.
And so
moving right along.
So those are all great and very useful measures. But the thing about an index is several. One, when we're in this particular one, we asked 4 questions about people's finances, which have to do with how they feel about their finances in their household, their expectations for how things might change in the future, whether it's a good time to make investments or purchases. And okay, I'm forgetting the 4th one. Who's got the 4th one? Jobs. Oh my God. Oh my goodness gracious. How could I possibly forget jobs? And when they're easy to find right now. And so all of those 4 questions are related to each other. And that's very important when creating an index, because there has to be a relationship among the questions, first of all. And second of all, they need to be measuring slightly different things. So what you're doing is you're putting them together, but separately, they also tell you something very specific about an aspect, in this instance, of finances. So it can be really useful because we average it. We do a little statistics, which we explain in the methodology. And what we'll be able to do is not only explain what's happening now, but going forward, as we regularly ask these questions of Americans over time, get to see how we're progressing as a nation.
Yeah, and I think it's also important just to point out for you methods geeks out there that this is on a scale of 1 to 10. And
Zero,
0 to
zero
10,
to
I'm
10.
sorry. I hate to think of zero
We
as
we
being.
want we desperately wanted a middle position,
Yes,
from
there
those
you go.
old Likert days. We
Yeah.
just had to have a real middle.
Yeah, so it's all scaled out, and that becomes the food for which the ingredients for which this becomes my baked stew or whatever I was a minute ago. And I think though I would say add one more component to this in terms of our motivation. We're going to be doing a lot of polls on the horse race. This is a presidential election year, of course, and we're going to be looking at battleground states. We're going to be looking at national numbers. This gets us into a dynamic that is really driving what's on people's minds right now. And if you're talking about a index on the economy, an index on healthcare, health summary, you're talking about the kind of two intense feelings people have. On the one hand, opening up the economy, taking away the restrictions and trying to get some jobs back into the picture. And on the other hand, maybe not doing that so quickly as we could jeopardize getting right back into the pickle we were in only so recently ago. So I think we're getting at two critical issues that are really driving where people are right now. And that's why I think this is a big motivation for us.
So let's tell what the numbers are. So let's start.
Well,
So
yeah, you take a hit at this, Jay, because I know you were really excited about this. So I'd like to hear what your biggest takeaway is.
Well, let's get the numbers out first. So right now, in this first release, we're releasing two numbers, and in the future, as we ask a broader series of questions about a broader series of issues, as Barb mentioned, we're going to have a single number, and it'll be the America Now Index. This number will tell you where America is headed, where we think we are at any given time. But right now, we wanted to start with two separate ones. So the economic index right now is at 4.1. So on a scale of 0 to 10, not great. 6.2 is the number for the health summary. And so that's where, when we asked these questions, we got the feeling, we came back and we looked at these numbers. And again, these are a series of questions that are averaged to come up with a single number. It was not surprising, and it was certainly consistent with what we're seeing in a huge number of polls, with people's growing concern about the economy as opposed to a lessening concern about healthcare. And I think it didn't surprise me, is that it stood out that this is a great moment in time. And when we do this on a periodic basis and we see this number, we see the economic number and where it's going, we see the health number and where it's going, it's going to tell us an awful lot about how Americans are thinking, first of all, but also how we're thinking about the future.
Mm-hmm.
You can't predict the future, but you can certainly ask Americans what they're thinking about the future. And I think that's what we're going to see. And I think that's where it's really valuable. All these polls, including the ones we're doing, are great. But to have a single number you can follow, it's kind of like the consumer price index that we have followed for 40 years. It gives you an easy to understand, here's where we are right now in a numerical format. I think that's different. I think it's super useful for all of us.
Yeah, and Jay, the 6.2 on the health outlook versus the 4.1 on the economic outlook is being driven by what I thought was really interesting, the most optimistic answer on the economy, which was about, as you just said, where they think they will be better off financially in their household in the next few months. That's the most optimistic component of that. That scores lower than the weakest one on the healthcare index.
Right.
So the best we got on the economic was 5.0. The least score on the healthcare was 5.5. And that had to do with current risk to your health being low. Jobs is clearly influencing the economic one and the difficulty of the employment picture. But all of them are south of where each of the components on the healthcare was. So we'll see. Then this will be our baseline.
For me, I think what was really interesting was you could really see the fault lines that are defining our politics right now. And believe it or not, I actually don't mean partisanship right now. When you look at women, for instance, and you look at the difference between women who have a college education and those who don't, you're just looking at an enormously different experience and a completely different outlook on both measures, both finances and healthcare. Women without a college education are having a much more difficult time. They're not seeing really the government, and they're not seeing the system itself working for them. When you look at women with a college education, it's dramatically different. Now, on finances, women in general are much more concerned and more pessimistic than men are. But I thought it was really very interesting to see those different experiences across, different demographics, across the different contours of the country geographically. Not surprisingly, not as much racially, but certainly there are significant differences that we see that are defining our politics and our polarization and our partisanship.
So we'll be able to dig down into the different components and the different demography, as Barb was just talking about, but we also have this overall barometer of each of these two things. So what happens the next few months as we do more of these? As Jay said, we're going to expand it into a national outlook, but also we're going to get a sense of just what's happening trend-wise on the economy and on healthcare as we try to dig out in both of those areas right now as a nation.
And we'll put a link to this into the show notes, so you can find. You could also just go to maristpoll.marist.edu, and it'll be the very first release up there right now, or second after this Poll Hub gets there. But you can take a look at it and track it over time, just as we will be doing.
So we go from talking a little bit about some new science to looking at some questions that have actually been trended over time. The Pew Research Group has released an analysis of a study which actually consists of two separate research projects that they did. One is a newer poll, which was done from April 29th through May 5th. And another is a new analysis of a similar national poll that they did about a week earlier, both with incredibly large sample sizes from their panels, almost at least 10,000 interviews with US adults and almost 11 in the one that's closer now. But the topic being not just about the coronavirus pandemic, but also about what Americans think about science, scientists, and the medical community. So which one of you wants to take on a little bit of a description of the findings on how the coronavirus and this COVID experience has impacted people's impressions of science?
I'll take on one key point. One of my big takeaways was, from this year to last year, overall, the scientific community, I thought, did pretty decently, at least if I'm reading this correctly, that the numbers showed some improvement in terms of people's sense of medical technology, medical science, who has the interest of the public at heart. Some things had an upward direction, which is really positive in a time when so much is doubted and there's so much attack going on. To have something that was positive out of these numbers, I thought was really impressive. And,
for instance, confidence in medical scientists went from 35% last year to 43% now.
Yeah, and that's something to talk about. I mean, something to think about.
Yeah, I think what really stood out to me here was that not thinking about right now in the midst of the pandemic and the amount of attention that science is getting. This is, they've asked these questions year after year. And so the trend, for instance, in confidence in scientists to act in the best interests of the public. This isn't about medical. This could get lumped into climate science, all kinds of stuff. That has steadily increased since 2016. And a great deal has gone from 21 to 39 from 2016 to now. And a fair amount's gone from 55 to 48. It's dropped a little bit, but that's because most of that share has gone to almost 4 in 10 Americans have a great deal of confidence in scientists act in the best interests of the public. I'm actually shocked by that based on the amount of partisan wrangling and anger there is around climate science. It's a great example, but around various topics that are scientific. that are in the public realm.
Are there any clues as to why that is? Because it does seem counterintuitive. I mean, we've been having all of these debates about science, particularly climate science. I mean, there has been all this discussion during COVID about, what can work and what doesn't work, and lots of different voices. Is there a clue as to how these numbers actually would be going up when, intuitively you might think they'd be going down?
I mean, looking through the Pew numbers, I don't see that like answer, because that was one of the things I was looking for, is why is this happening? They do have some partisan splits. They ask questions about scientists versus medical science. They begin to break it down that way. But I didn't see anything that answered that question. I think that's a fascinating question. I think that's something, how do we determine why there's this counterintuitive trend going one way when we would think, clearly we're thinking about the wrong things or incorrect markers if it's going the opposite direction. But I don't know what they are. I didn't see it in this poll. I didn't.
Yeah.
Lee,
Yeah.
did you see anything?
No, but one of the things I would point out, I think, is when you have 1 out of every 4 households, employed people, workers, now seeking unemployment benefits. When you have 100,000 plus Americans who have died from this in the past 3 months, to my way of thinking, it makes a lot of sense to start looking at, who knows something about how these are not just little wrinkles in our normal day of life. These are not incremental changes. These are huge upheavals and huge attack on normal as we know it. So I think there is some need. Look, I didn't know much about the coronavirus when this started out. And, when it does, becomes something that you as an individual want to know something about, and you want to know what you should be doing, and you want to rely on. Some people would look at the best information available to them, which, from my way of thinking, and apparently a growing number of Americans, are the people in the public health community. I think that's a logical place to look for the kind of expertise that's going to help guide us through this. And a lot of what they've said, at the time seemed really shocking that we could have 100,000 Americans in the first wave. And a lot of people said that is impossible. And look what happened, the tragedy of that in the numbers alone. And then also the shakedown in the economy. So I think you look for people who have some insight into this. And I think that's a logical place to go. The fact that more Americans are doing that, not everybody by any scope of the imagination, any stretch of the imagination, but the fact that more people are doing that than would have prior to this kind of crisis, I think is a little comforting in an era where everything is under the microscope of doubt, which we all know.
Well, let me go through go
Sure.
through the numbers of some of the main points here that were in this research. So confidence in medical sciences, we talked about it. Jay, you mentioned in 2016, people who said that they had a great deal of confidence in medical sciences was 24%. It was 35% last time, and now it's 43%. So those are those numbers. It was a great deal. Confidence in scientists overall have gone in the last 4 years from 21 to 39. The ethical standards of medical doctors, very high. 23 last year, 35 this year. And overall, the views of medical doctors, mostly positive, has pretty much stayed the same. 74 last year, 72 now. And medical research sciences have also pretty much stayed the same. But I think it's interesting that the fact that what has changed is those areas that tend to be more public, as opposed to the concept of your personal medical doctor, who people generally do have a great deal of confidence in. And it is counterintuitive to the debate that we've been having here. I know we've mentioned it lots and lots of times in the past, but partisanship does seem to have and play a significant role here in people's attitudes. And one of the changes has been that more Democrats, more Democratic leaning independents, I think, have had a more positive outlook, where Republicans and independents who lean Republican tend to have had more of a steady state opinion of the scientific community. But certainly, an interesting study, one that went much more even in depth than we are discussing here and worth taking a look at.
Yeah, I wanted to make two points in summary. One, the political fallout on this is very important. I mean, I saw just a Facebook ad that the Trump campaign took out where you have Donald Trump without a mask standing in front of the American flag, and Sleepy Joe, we know who that is, wearing a mask that says Sleepy Joe on it, if you don't know who that is, and he's standing in front of a Chinese flag. So that's the kind of pull under these numbers. I know it doesn't necessarily add up easily, but that's the kind of thing we're going to get more of, this kind of like mask, no mask, social isolation, no social isolation. But I want to make one other just point real quickly is we talk about a lot of polls as being snapshots in time, and obviously our index is something else. This is a panel, and maybe you can just talk just a little bit about what that provides as a unique opportunity.
Well, I think what we can do is, panels are good for trend analysis. There can be difficulties with the representativeness of that over time, but certainly, we have confidence in the Pew Research team to be working at that over time. And what they can do is they are actually going to be looking at the very same individuals and how their opinions may be changing over time. And certainly when it comes to science, and I know I've said it a million times how I'm this science advocate, but it is really, really important, especially when you look globally, where you have this distrust of science and the difficulties that countries can run into, not only the tragedy of loss of life, but also the economic upheaval that occurs within those countries. I'm thinking, specifically of Brazil, who's going through also a very difficult time, and where those numbers are of trusting in science and getting a message that is based in the best science that we have at the moment can be difficult. But so that was just a little twist. I think I got your panel stuff in, Lee. But
thank you. I see the soapbox you were standing on also, even though we are remote.
We definitely can't.
I can't help it. I just can't help it.
We definitely can't see each other's. We can't see each other's feet. Don't get the wrong idea, folks. We are on. We have head and shoulders only. That's all we're seeing as we're isolating and doing the podcast.
I bet someone's going to say that will do it for this edition of Poll Hub right now.
Well, I was going to, but you got started, so take it away.
Well, that will indeed do it for this edition of Poll Hub, which is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York, where none of us are at the moment, but hope to be back really soon. Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our editor, and Amelia Morell is our production assistant. Without those three, this doesn't happen.
And also particular shout out for Amelia, because she also helped us last time around, not only suggesting but researching the topic last week, and she continues to do that going forward. So thanks, Amelia, and also give a shout out to Dad. We know that
and the new dog, the new puppy,
and the new puppy Hudson, who's at 17 pounds at 3 months. So he's got a long way to go. We also want to thank the Roper Center Archive at Cornell University for providing us with the ability to look back at survey questions and results over the decades. That's how we can look at snapshots and also take a long view look.
And if you've got questions, you can reach out to us on social media. We're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram at Marist Poll. If you want to learn more about polling and all the things we talk about every week, we've told you about it, the Marist Poll Academy. It's an online academy. Don't let the word academy scare you. It's actually fun and easy and engaging, and it's free, so check that out. And just a mention again of the America Now Index, our new index that we released this week, and we'll be updating over the course of forever. How long? Maybe forever. This index could live to 150, long beyond any of us. We don't know, but it is a state of America's thinking about what's going on, and so please take a look at that. The connection to that, or the link to that, are in the show notes. So finally, as we say every week, stay safe, and as America opens up, as it is, take care. Be careful as you get out there and re-engage with your fellow Americans.